One, this is a live research update with my beautiful wife Holly and myself today, and we have some good stuff we want to get into on BZ, which is we haven't discussed psychedelics for a while, and the Skripal attacks in the UK, and Holly has been digging into that, and myself as well. And so we want to start off with that, and then we're going to probably get into some Salem stuff toward the end. Also want to encourage people to donate and support the show. We're under a lot of research expense for the Salem witchcraft trial stuff, and or Salem witch trial stuff. Boy, now I'm getting the witchcraft trial. So, yeah. So there's a lot of research we're doing. We need to get back to Salem. So we're going to try to do this episode sort of as a fundraiser too. So we appreciate any help today with that. Do you want to start off with the Skripal attack? Hold on. People are not hearing your sound here. Hold on a second. Let's see what's going on. Sorry, folks. Let me figure out if something else is going on here.
Oh.
All right, try that now.
Can the audience hear me now? Works now?
Okay, yes, they hear you now. So, all right, sorry, folks. Holly, we just had sorry, babe. Give a repeat of what you just said. Sorry about that, folks.
Okay, so I guess no one heard anything that I said. So
nothing, right? Sorry.
Okay, all right.
Totally my fault.
Sorry, it's okay. So I follow alternative news. I try to report on alternative news stories, strange news stories
on your own show.
Yeah. Right, on my YouTube channel. And so I've been following the Skripal case. This came out in early March, on March 4th. Skripal, who is a double agent, he used to work, supposedly, if we're following the mainstream narrative, he worked for the KGB in the 1980s, was in Afghanistan for a while. Then he flipped in the 1990s and 2000s to being a double agent working for the UK government. And he was found guilty of treason by the Russian government, was supposed to be put to death, I believe. I mean, he was found guilty of high treason, but he was swapped in a spy swap between the UK government and the Russian government in, I believe it was 2004. So he's been living in the UK, claiming supposedly he wants to return back home. He has a daughter who's 33 years old, and she came to visit him in the UK, and they were poisoned. So the mainstream narrative says that it was BZ poisoning, which is a psychotropic drug. And I thought, hey, maybe I should ask Jan if he knows anything about BC or has an idea about this before I report on it. So I just thought it would be a cool topic.
Well, and BZ is an interesting topic. It's considered probably the most potent of all psychotropic or psychedelic drugs. It's considered an incapacitating compound. There is probably less information available on it than probably most of the other drugs. I've investigated. It was invented by Hoffman LaRoche, is what the official claim is, back in the what year was it? Now I'm forgetting. I don't see it there at the top there. But the official history of it is that it was created as a war drug by the Swiss and used by the U.S. and U.K. And in the United States, though, there is only one man legally able to make these substances, including LSD, MDMA, DMT, psilocybin, etc. All of these different psychotropic, psychoactive drugs that are considered Schedule 1 narcotics or whatever. There's only one man in the country, in the United States, legally able to make them. And I interviewed him, in fact, years ago on the show, and that's Dr. Professor Dave Nichols, back, when I was bought into, and I'll pull it up here in just a second, back when I was bought into the official narrative before I woke up, which I've explained in my work over the last 8 years discovering all of this. Let's see. And so, way back in the day, I interviewed this guy. And so Dr. David Nichols at Purdue University. And so basically, between the U.S. and U.K., there may be only 2 guys legally able to make this stuff. And in the United States, this man right here would be the guy. So it's interesting that, and as it says right here, the only chemist in the U.S. allowed to legally make LSD, DMT, psilocybin for clinical research. And, he's able to make many of these other drugs. And this interview was done in 2010, so that's quite a long time ago. But so he's also done research with the Hefter Institute, which we've mapped in the brain database, as well as Rick Doblin and MAPS. Rick Doblin, that's a whole other interesting story. Rick Doblin was behind MDMA's outlaw originally, using, as far as the official history goes, using Mothers Against Drunk Drivers to get MDMA outlawed. And then he created MAPS, the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, to make it legal for clinical research. Most of that research in these drugs seems to be about serotonin blockers, because when your serotonin is down or blocked, they can really mess with your head. MDMA being one of the leading substances for being able to do that. Did you have something you wanted to add?
So just saying hi to people in the chat here real quick. If you guys want to, throw a super chat in there, that would be cool. Been buying a lot of books and doing a lot of research lately, and hopefully we'll be, Jan will come back to Salem at some point. We can do some more research over there.
Indeed. So please, any donations, all the support we can get, we appreciate. Again, we are trying to do this sort of as a fundraiser today, too, to help pay for research. I'm going to throw the donation link up on the website. If people are having trouble with the super chat link, they can donate directly through the website if I can do that.
Okay. So while you do that, I'm just going to talk a little bit more about the Skripal case. So on March 4th, 2018, he and his daughter, Yulia, who was visiting from Moscow, were poisoned with the mainstream media. UK says it's called Novichok nerve agent. They're basically saying it's an unknown nerve agent. And as of March 15th, they were in critical condition. And then Yulia came out of critical condition and started talking on March 29th. And then her father was out of critical condition on April 6th. So basically, you're saying when people are on BC, they're in and out of consciousness and just tripping out, and it can turn you into a zombie? Is that what you're describing it?
Well, the high lasts for about a week, and people are completely scrambled. Fortunately, I've never had the misfortune to try it. You know, it's
Oh my God.
the Hollywood film Jacob's Ladder was created after that. Sorry, let me. I was just seeing if I could pull up the video there, and it's a. I meant to have it up earlier. Let me just mute this before it
Yeah, I don't
gets.
know if anyone's ever seen the film Jacob's Ladder, but it's it's was it from the late 80s or something like that?
Yeah,
It's
I'm
supposed to
I'm
be.
just and
Oh,
thank you Whoopty for the donation just now. I appreciate that. But this goes into all of his flashbacks and everything, and you know he's trying to report this, and they're claiming that he's crazy and everything, and it was really U.S. military experiments, which we now know with MK Ultra and everything they were doing, just like they created the counterculture and psychedelic 60s and all of that as a an attack on the American people. For those of you who aren't familiar with that, I've covered that in probably 200 episodes on my shows, so that's just a lot to go through, you know, on a segue right now, but check that out.
so the
Thank
Tim Robbins film is about a Vietnam vet who was supposedly tested. And the term was Jacob's Ladder for that nerve agent psychotropic drug.
and thank you Trivium Think for the donation as well. And so that's $40 between the two of you. We really appreciate that. Now,
Woo!
so getting back to this BZ fiasco. So now, other than Dr. David Nichols as a potential candidate for manufacturing, if it was indeed BZ, the only other option might be someone at Porton Down who would have invented it, and they flat out deny that any nerve agent that was created there would have been employed. But, you know, the key term may be nerve agent. Is it actually a nerve agent, or is it an incapacitating compound? You know, it may be in the very definition of what they're calling it and using spin against, you know, that they manufactured it themselves. Now, I had looked up in some of these articles now on Wikipedia, when you look up BZ, it takes you to, let me just pull up the brain database here again. It takes you to, well, obviously Wikipedia. And up here it says NATO BZ, code BZ, U.S. Army code EA2277. And then it says Soviet code substance 78. So this is how they're trying to throw it at the Soviet Union. Now, when you go to that, you end up with one link here in their footnotes to an article from Newsweek. And so this is an article from 2002 in which a whistleblower claims that the Soviets had created an analog, and I have that in the notes there also, but they're claiming that the Soviets created an analog of BZ and that was used in the attack. And this is from the Newsweek article I just had up there. But whistleblower and 26-year veteran of Russia's chemical weapons program, Mirzayanov, suspect of military gas may have been used. In the 1980s, we developed an analog to the well-known psychotropic drug BZ, which we called Substance 78. So this is how the British and United States, and especially the British, are trying to spin it as a Soviet compound, but they're claiming that they created an analog, and we already know it was under the employ of the United States and Great Britain. And so, you know, the real question comes down is, you know, who manufactured it? If it was manufactured for a military application, it came through one of the legal channels, which means, you know, probably, you know, we can guess someone at Porton Down or possibly Dr. Dave Nichols. I mean, we're limited, extremely limited to the, you know, potential of the potential candidates to who could have possibly use that. Now, of course, this is just speculation, my opinion, as to who are the possible candidates to have created it for this application.
Right. So we're talking about, you know, this is the UK government demanding that the Russians respond to this. So on March 12th, Prime Minister Theresa May identified the nerve agent used in the attack as the Russian developed Novichok agent. This is according to Wikipedia, and demanded explanation from the Russian government. So May also said that Russia was responsible for the incident, and they announced the expulsion of 23 Russian diplomats in retaliation.
So always the dog and pony show with this stuff, right?
Now, so Porton Down, you said, was the name of the company. It's a laboratory in the UK.
Military base laboratory, right.
Right. And so they were responsible for the cleanup, and they just got a bunch of money. They got like a 48 million pound bump in their funding from the Britain's Defence Science and Technology Department, the UK Defence. So I don't know if they got a big chunk of money for working on this case.
So did they like create the BZ, do the BZ attack, and then get 48 billion in funding to stop future BZ attacks?
Well, it could be, this is my speculation. It could be hush money that they just received this big bump in funding this time around. Although they are even saying that they cannot confirm, Porton Down is saying that they cannot confirm that the nerve agent was actually made in Russia. So they're kind of playing both sides, it seems like.
Yeah, here we go. Unidentified Porton scientists cannot confirm nerve agent used on Skripal was made in Russia. So again, when we look at BZ and the limited production, it probably either came from Porton Down or from someone, a professor at University of Purdue or Purdue University. So, and these were all articles that were up on this. Kind of didn't manage to get through all of them quite properly as we were going through them. I apologize. But Russia, trace of Western-made nerve gas agent seen in UK samples. So, the Russians are putting it back on the U.S. and UK. Again, the U.S. and UK were the originators of BZ. We're the ones that have a history of, employing such things in war. More information on Dave Nichols. He had worked with Walter Pankey, who I had exposed was an agent working with Tim Leary. What's going on?
I just need to do something real quick. Amit's messing with my light. Hold on a second.
No problem. And then, let's see. Nichols had also made 2 kilos of MDMA for Rick Doblin and MAPS. And he had also made the DMT for Rick Strassman's study to promote false aliens and spirituality with DMT. And they made a better way to make psilocybin for the Hefter Research Institute's studies, which is also Intel. Nichols helped to promote spirituality and helped on the injunction for the UDV Church. And created, I think it was called DOI, hallucinogenic amphetamine, but they don't call it an actogen there. Let's see. Nichols states that psychedelics block the immune chain, and he developed a drug called, I think it's called Ethylade, that's more potent than LSD and harder to make. And, basically, Prozac and these dangerous SSRI drugs come out of a lot of the LSD and other research from the 60s up to the 70s and now continuing it. Listening to Nichols' talks and lectures on this, it sounds like the overarching research is, again, to suppress and block serotonin production and reception in the brain through Raphe cells, and he admits himself that psychedelics stop Raphe cells from operating correctly. So let's see. It causes Raphe cells to stop firing when in REM sleep, causes serotonin to shut down. So those of you who've done MDMA at a rave party, this was a DEA-created drug that was promoted by Sasha Shulgin, and Robert Forty has admitted to me that he was probably the first dealer and lab created under the charge of Sasha Shulgin, or under the guidance of Sasha Shulgin, and that's what he's told me. Anyway, it's always a lot of crap going on there. Please support the show. You know what Holly and I want to do also is, if we get enough support for this episode, we want to go into some of the blueprint material that we have found on Salem, and I've put together last night sort of what we've noticed as the blueprint for all of these books and the research that they are putting out on the Salem witch trials et al. Hi, Amit.
Yeah, they're messing with the lights, so I think they know I'm on camera right now. So, do you want to talk about some of your books that you have purchased?
Oh, goodness. Well, we can get into this one is on the secret Salem underground tunnels. This guy also has another book, Sub Rosa, which is underground, and then he has two roses there. I mean, he's likely a big occultist with the title and the roses and all. What did the roses symbolize again?
The blue one is blue roses symbolize mystery, trickery, because they're not real. Their blue roses don't exist naturally in nature, so it has to be
underground
created,
trickery,
manufactured.
So
and the red is fidelity.
Fidelity to underground trickery. That would be my guess is what that means. But so these are two excellent books on the underground tunnels and everything, or decent books. The editing is atrocious.
And this is just such a strange subject that we've fallen into. How did you find out about that there was a whole tunnel system in Salem, Massachusetts?
I think it was when you and I were walking through downtown Salem, and we just kept seeing, the same books. And then we walked into one store near the town hall, and there was, one set of books that didn't it wasn't the same that we had seen in every other store, even though it seems very what they want to promote with the whole thing.
So they offer like tours, like you can take like ghost tours of Salem, or, fake witch / real witch tours in Salem. It's very touristy like that. But then we noticed that there was something called Salem's Underground Tunnels. There's several books about it, and they claim it was for, rum smuggling, because Salem was the wealthiest port in early New England. Even it was larger than Boston at the time of the Salem witch trials. So they talk about piracy. There's like a pirate museum in Salem. So it's this whole other facet to the town of Salem and our research that we've discovered.
I'm just reading someone's comments here, seeing if they're trolling. Anyway, so still no more donations yet, unfortunately. So anybody willing to throw up 100, and we'll go into some of this other research we got here. But yeah, so we also we've been getting in a lot on the antinomian and free grace issue, and yeah, the person already knew that I was talking about them. Interestingly, so now this whole free grace thing is really key, because antinomianism is the antithesis of logos. Antinomianism is essentially, well, the modern version of it. People have heard Satanist Aleister Crowley's term "do what thou wilt," and then free grace we could directly associate to. And divine grace, we could automatically associate to the chosen people. So, these two terms are direct copies of what they are within Judaism. They've just renamed them. So, under divine or free grace, just because you were born a certain way, you're already chosen by God. You can do whatever crappy acts to your neighbors and everybody else. What you do doesn't matter. You don't need to do fine work or fine art or fine anything, which of course is what we see in all of the modern art and everything, is a total degraded form of art. A woman menstruating on a piece of canvas or something is considered a
What?
art form now. Oh yeah, or like Duchamp's. I've shown that. We did a show on that a couple years ago. Where
Okay. Um. Okay.
Duchamp's toilets, etc. This sort of stuff is, he signs his name on a toilet and suddenly that's art. So it's just nonsense. Rather than creating something actually artful. So this and doing quality work. This is antinomianism, and then they don't need to, based on this, because of divine grace. So it's basically do what thou wilt is the whole of the law. So
So when you talk about the Puritans as antinomians, it goes back to Protestantism and Martin Luther, and so the two tenets of Protestantism that broke apart from the rest of Christianity at the time was predestination, and the Puritans believed in predestination of the elect. So they thought, there's already a certain chosen people that God already picked to be raptured, or they were the people who have grace. It doesn't really matter what you do. So that's the predestination facet. And then there's divine grace or free grace. These early groups, including many of the Puritan sects that we talked about in our last episode, a lot of them were antinomian in that the fact that they accepted free grace or free love. They basically, what do they call themselves? Familias or something like that, instead of antinomians, because they were a family that was involved with free grace and free love. So they were allowed to basically do whatever they wanted. And Anne Hutchinson argued this in court. She was the Puritan woman who supposedly founded the colony of Rhode Island, and she preached radical antinomianism.
So, and thanks, Jeffrey, for the $5. Much appreciated. If we can get another 95 going here, I'd like to dive into our blueprint that we have on how they lay out all of this stuff. But so what I want to talk about for a minute, so on last week's show, we were discussing all of these connections, all of these strings between like Thomas Morton and the Marymount group in the 1600s in near Salem, with the Merry Pranksters and Tim Leary. And then I discussed Marlene Dobkin de Rios's quote on antinomianism, and from my article Entheogens, What's in a Name, and tying that back to the historical antinomianism. We made several connections. So we have several more new connections in this regard, and that is that the Anne Hutchinson, who founded Rhode Island, is essentially she's later mirrored by Gloria Steinem. So again, we have the exact same thing. What they did, we had the Diggers branch off that we discussed last week, and the Diggers from the 1600s became the Diggers, and like Abby Hoffman and these people from the 60s who started the Chicago riots and told kids to kill their parents. And then we had the Levelers in England. We had all of these different groups from the 1600s that became mirrored in the 1960s and early 70s promotion of psychedelic drugs by the CIA, et al. So we can see this early hub around Harvard's origins, the Royal Society, the Mayflower Compact, etc. That's really the core of this whole attack, anciently and contemporarily speaking. So, it's the exact same pattern. They've actually changed very little, other than right now they're trying to create transhumanism so that they can chip us all and really have, full control. Amit looks like she's being trouble today. What's up, Amit?
Yeah, just being trouble. So yes, I think, basically I think I mean, you just jumped into transhumanism, but you can think of that from an antinomian perspective, even, if you can just become, part of the singularity, or you can escape into this robot body like they're marketing to us, then you have grace. You can do whatever you want. You can live forever. There's no accountability for you as a human. So that's a subject for another talk, but
Yeah, and
that's what they're marketing to us.
yeah, and it's all antinomianism. Just like, again, I quoted Marlene Darius's article in that the other day. Really, really creepy stuff when you get into how they promote that. So I'm just gonna pull up that quote and read it again because it's really meaty. Here, it's just pulling up here. Of course, right when you want it, the website slows down. Okay, so psychedelic substances like ayahuasca create a state of hypersuggestibility in which persons are very open to being influenced by others. Many traditional cultures have utilized this condition to inculcate cultural values and behaviors in young people as they receive initiation into adulthood. In the West, countercultural values can be inculcated in young people, especially when using these psychedelics, or inculcated in young people when using these psychedelics, especially when using them in an antinomian context. So, in one paragraph, Marlene clarifies the historical use of ayahuasca, peyote, the ancient Eleusinian mysteries, the promotion of psychedelics by the CIA, Royal Society, Harvard, SRI, the whole band, and and then again, antinomian means of or relating to the view that Christians are released by grace from the obligation of observing moral law. So, of course, anyone, to a Christian, observing natural law is part of being Christian and part of being in Logos, whereas a Satanist does what they wilt. It's do what thou wilt is the whole in the law. So, the Satanist uses the whole in the law to claim do what thou wilt is the whole of the law. I mean, it's just their typical nonsense inversion. Obviously, if nobody followed any rules or anything, society would, go crazy. And that's what they're attempting to do, is literally recreate the fall. So, when you go outside, people don't dress well anymore. They wear their pajamas out. We have Richard Dawkins promoting bestiality, or not bestiality. What was he promoting? Cannibalism.
Yeah.
They're trying to legalize pedophilia and all of this stuff. These are the antinomians. These are the Satanists. This isn't based on truth, honor, respect, and care of each other. This is based on divine grace and do what thou wilt.
So someone in the chat brought up the idea of grace, and it's just the idea of just forgiveness from by God, forgiveness by God. So people were talking about divine grace versus works based. So that was the big debate between some Puritans and Pilgrims and people in early New England. Was they called it the antinomian debate or the antinomian controversy. And there were Puritans who were saying, we have divine grace, and, we're blessed by God, and, we are, you can tell that we are, we have divine grace because we are well off. We are financially successful. So that showed that you had grace from God, versus works based, which was, doing Christian acts, the golden rule,
being neighborly,
yeah.
Giving money to charity on your own free will, not by passing laws and communism, which comes and forces it,
Right. So the Puritans under Cromwell had outlawed alms to the poor. And I believe I mentioned this in another talk, maybe not. And also they outlawed the celebration of Christmas because they didn't want to have that sort of voluntary charity. They wanted to have specific mandated charities in the new colonies, and that was a big part of their debate as well.
Keep going. I'm going to go run and grab that book.
Okay, so there's also when we were learning about the Diggers, it was another sect of the Puritans, started out in England, and all of these separate groups all launched in 1649, and that was when Cromwell took power in England. I think there's like 5 or 6 different Puritan sects, and the Diggers were literally people who would go to churchyards. They declared the land to be public land, which was a new concept, and they would start to dig and farm there and promote basically the foundations of communism or free land, and promoting it that way, and then it spread into the U.S.
So this book is on the antinomian controversy. Obviously, it's titled that, and the light is glaring there. But so, this book is the same, and what they do. This guy is David Hall, Duke University Press. But if we get some more donations, I'd like to go into this. But what they're doing is they constantly invert this antinomianism and then claim that it's Christianity, when in fact it's the antithesis of Christianity. And then each one of these books that we've read goes on and constructs an inverted argument based on this antinomian thing and then calling it Christianity. It would be like calling the Church of Satan Christians and then going around and blaming the Christians for what the Church of Satan did. So that's basically, what we see repeated, throughout this stuff. But, and this guy, he even blames, one of the guys comes out and says, this is Satanism, this isn't Christianity. And he blames the guy for calling that out as being the troublemaker, not the antinomianism itself. So, all of these guys love to, spin the research, and then they'll say that they've created this ridiculous term that they love to use called Christian Hebraism. So, in other words, Christians pretending to be Hebrews or Jews, when in fact it's Hebraic Christianism, or Jews pretending to be Christians, because Judaism had been outlawed. And we've done a lot of research into the the word Puritan coming from Purim, and it was basically created in Europe in the Reformation after Judaism's outlaw, which we've already discussed in previous shows. There were a number of cases of human sacrifice that had happened. One just happened recently in Russia. There were the issues of usury and banking, and there were issues of Kabbalism, etc. And so because of these things, Judaism had been outlawed in many places in Europe, excluding Holland and Germany, I believe.
Well, if you look into the era of history, we're looking at Cromwell as the Puritan leader who took a hold of England after the public execution of Charles I. And so after Cromwell took power, the parliament changed. They called it a rump parliament because power was concentrated, and all of these different Puritan sects came about, and Marranos had a very strong influence in England. At that point, Cromwell legalized Judaism again, and he worked with Marranos and Jews to establish the Caribbean islands. So this is how we tie into Barbados. It was legalized, Judaism was legalized over in Barbados, and then it eventually went into the United States that way as well.
Correct. All right. So, well, are we about done for the day? It doesn't seem like people want to go for the donation for us to go into the blueprint material. Should we give them a minute to see if anyone wants to throw up for that?
That's okay.
All right.
We pretty much talked a lot about it. anyway,
I mean,
regardless.
yeah, we talked a lot around it, but if they want to go through and piece it together, I guess they can. So, all right. Well, thank you, everyone. And, we're not doing a full hour today. It was just an update on the research. So much appreciated. Thank you for the support in the chat today. And thanks all. Have a great weekend. And bye-bye.